Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. I know lots of folks are coming in from all over the US and other parts of the world, so wish you all a very good day. Um, we're we're going to spend a lot of time talking about travel photography, but I just want to spend a few seconds, if I can, about who I am and what I do. I'm a Lumix ambassador, and I spend my life basically with photography. I travel to the ends of the earth if I can. I think I would spend all my time traveling. Just the fact that it does finally start impacting the pocket a little bit. But in the most part, I have spent, well, since I was about 13 years old, uh, doing some form of photography or another. And I just love the outdoors. I love nature. I love landscapes. And most of all, I love to travel to go get those images. So let me do this. Let me share my screen and then we can start. Hopefully you can all see my screen all right. If not, you're going to put something in the chat and hopefully I will see it there. I'm also going to open up the chat window so that I can see any questions that come in. And if there are questions, put them in the chat box. Be most happy to answer as many as I can. We got some questions from folks that registered, and a lot of them will be answered during my presentation, but the ones that I don't specifically respond to, I will cover them in the end. So with that said, let's, first and foremost look at the topic itself. And, it's travel photography, but I think you've got to wow people. That's the way you arouse interest. That's the way you get other people to travel. And if they travel with you, all the more better. And that's where the real fun begins. So, if I was to look at what travel photography is, and there's all kinds of statements that are made about travel photography, but really it's capturing landscapes, wildlife, cultures, traditions, etc., etc. But there is another form of travel photography which is done specifically for competitive purposes. And the Photographic Society of America and FIAP, which is the European organization, all tend to kind of define it in a way that it puts in a fair amount of restrictions into what your images can and cannot be. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time addressing that, but still fundamentally they talk about images that express, a feeling of time, place, people, culture, etc., which is very similar to what I indicated that genre of photography is in fact. So in reality, it's not just taking a nice photograph. It's actually taking a photograph that is more than just a photograph. I don't want to call it snapshots because the tendency today is to pull out your iPhone or Android or whatever smartphone you have and quickly grab a picture. And more importantly, it's grabbing pictures that are selfies. And I'd say that's fine. It gives you the ability to talk about where you've been, show your friends where you've been, and that's all okay. But does that really imply that being a travel photograph that's going to wow somebody? The answer is typically no. So you master the craft, you become proficient with your equipment, and yes, that's all very important. But most importantly, you got to, produce images that are such that a magazine or a stock site would want to buy from you. Personally, I do not sell any images. I have no desire to sell my images. I really photograph for the sake of my own satisfaction and to make the images that give me pleasure. If I wanted to get into selling my images, I think it would detract from the amount of time I'd be able to spend capturing my images. So I'd much rather capture the images, forget about selling them. What do I use? And this really comes up as a big question a lot of times. What cameras are good, what lenses are good. So I'm just very briefly going to tell you about the equipment that I carry for travel photography. It is not necessarily the equipment that I use for all of my work, because when I'm doing macro, when I'm doing product photography, when I'm doing people portraiture and that kind of stuff, I do use many other lenses and many other products. But typically for travel photography, I use a micro four thirds camera and full frame cameras. So the micro four third camera that I'm using now, and since I am a Lumix ambassador, those are the products that I use, is the G9 Mark II, which has literally sort of taken leaps and bounds moving forward from what the original G9 was. The ability to focus has been vastly improved, high frame rates, and it's now 25 megapixels, which is more than sufficient for any kind of photography that you do. In fact, all my cameras are 25 megapixels or less. From the full frame side, I use the S5 Mark II X typically when I'm going to be traveling, and I know that I will be doing a fair amount of video in addition to photography. If I'm only going to be doing photography, then I'll carry the S5 II, which will give me the ability to do video if I so need to, but typically the S5 II does fine. And for a lot of the street work, city, just carrying around a camera that you put into your sling bag and walk about with would be the S9. And they all pretty much have the same, density as far as megapixels are concerned, about 24 megapixels, more than sufficient for anything that one would want to do. As far as lenses, if there was one lens that was going to be in my bag, and if somebody said, you can't carry anything else, there's only one lens that you can carry, I would carry the 24 to 70 f2.8. To me, yes, it's a little bit on the heavier side compared to the 24-105 f4, but a fixed 2.8 2470 is the most versatile lens that you can have. On the telephoto side, the 70 to 200 is again on the heavier side, 2.8, or the f4, again, based upon what the travel is going to be and where. But that's the lens I would carry. If I'm going to use tele extenders, then the 70 to 200 2.8 is the lens of choice. And then there's one wide angle lens that I would always recommend you have, and that's the 16 to 35, and that's an f4. However, if I'm going to be doing night photography, night images, whether they be just Milky Way stuff or other astro, then I will throw in my bag the 18mm 1.8. On the micro four thirds side, since that camera is really for reach, I use it primarily for doing nature and wildlife images. I have one lens that I put in the bag, and that's the 100-400 with a tele extender, which gives me a non-tele extended equivalence of 200 to 800 millimeters. So, that's it. You got to remember one thing. When you are traveling, you do not want to take excessive amounts of gear. The fact is that you'll want to take lots, you won't use it, and then you'll regret having brought so much with you. So be minimal and carry exactly what you need, and that's more than sufficient. So this is just from an image point of view, the 1635, 70 to 200, 2470, and the 18 when I need it. If I don't have any need for astro or night photography, then the 18 stays behind. Even though it's a relatively light lens, it'll stay behind, and the 2470 does all of the work that I need to do. 1635, even though it gives me the angle in the field of view, is not a lens I would recommend for astro work. The 2470 is far superior. And the other advantage with the 2470 is not only from a speed point of view, it has beautiful optics. Now, depends upon where and what you're going to be doing. Tripods, to me, are critical, and they are critical both for landscapes as well as wildlife. However, if you are going to a place like Africa, just let's say you're going to Tanzania, then you're not going to be carrying a tripod because I don't know where you're going to use it. You'll be in a moving vehicle, and that's when you either will use bean bags that they typically supply you, or you'll use something like a window mount, which I will show you. But if you're going to be, let's say, going to Namibia as an example, then yes, you're going to be doing a lot of landscapes, you're going to be doing a lot of night photography, so you are going to require a tripod in your kit. And I use a Benro tripod carbon fiber that is not extremely light, but it is light enough to carry around. And the head that I use in the most part is this Rogetti head, which is a geared head that gives me infinite control. So the tripod has a leveling bowl that I can use to level up the tripod. And then I mount the geared head, and I have absolute micro control on how the camera is positioned, how it's angled, and its stability is unmatched. The one other tool that I would recommend you buy, if you buy a Novaflex or you buy a similar tool, is a multi-tool. Just keep it in your bag at all times. The one thing is, if you are going to some of the more, let's call it, I shouldn't say third world, but countries that have a lot of misunderstanding as to what a weapon is versus what a tool is, then if you are going to carry a tool, then put the tool in your carry-on bag, not in your, sorry, in your checked-in bag, not in your carry-on bag. And then pull it out when you get there and, put it into your camera backpack or whatever you carry. And then again, once you get from one location to the next, put it into your checked-in bag. I do always, in my bag, either attached with a carabiner or inside the bag, I carry a Platypod Extreme, which gives me the ability to do low-level photography, shooting from the ground, or if I'm in an unstable place where I would rather have something that's got some spikes that'll, ensure stability. I use the Platypod, which is something that I helped, produce. So to me, that is an essential element that is always carried in all of my kit. Remember that when you are traveling, you're going to need things like a good backpack, preferably a soft-sided backpack that will scrunch down when needed. But if you are going to be traveling in, let's say, Alaska, or if you're going to Africa, you will have weight restrictions because of the size of the hold that these planes have. So you need to have your equipment in soft-sided, bags that can be put into small spaces. Hard-sided rollerboard type bags are not something that I would recommend if you're traveling to places that you're going to be going around in small planes or where overhead space is going to be limited. You need to be aware that in a lot of situations, there is no way you're going to be able to carry your camera equipment on the plane with you. In certain situations, if you do want to do that, you may actually end up having to buy an extra seat just to be able to carry your equipment with you on inside the cabin. Rain sleeves are extremely important, as are insect head nets. Just they pack up small. They should sit in your bag when you need it. There are places like you can go to Iceland in the summer, and the midges over there will drive you nuts. So if you don't have a head net, they'll be not only inside your nostrils, inside your eyes, inside your ears, and you'll be spending more time trying to get them out than you'd have time taking pictures. Memory cards, lots of times people have this thing about not having a way to download. So if you don't, make sure you carry sufficient memory cards. To me, I think, 4 memory cards usually is more than sufficient as long as I have the ability to download my images on a nightly basis and make a backup with at least 2 copies. Now, one of the other things that before you travel, you need to do is to understand what kind of power there is in the country that you're going to and what kind of power adapter you're going to need. Whether it's an M or an N or a D-type adapter, make sure you get these adapters before you travel. Once you get there, the likelihood of your being able to buy one of these becomes extremely, I would say, is nearly impossible. If you don't want to carry your laptop, carry some sort of an external backup device. There are downloaders that are available, or if you have a reasonably powerful iPad, it'll work. It'll help you do your downloads. Cleaning kits, extremely critical to have a cleaning kit with you. Sensor swabs, because if you get dust on your sensor, you want to be able to get it out. So a rocket blower with sensor swab cleaning kits, sensor swab liquids should be in your, not necessarily your backpack, but should definitely be in your luggage somewhere. And microfiber cloths, which are really valuable, whether it be a dusty situation where you can use it to just cover up your gear, or if nothing else, you can use it to wipe off dew, moisture, whatever it is. These are absolutely invaluable as far as their use is concerned. And then do not forget trash bags, big trash bags. They serve 3 purposes. One, they'll cover you if it starts raining. You need a quick rain jacket. 2, they are great to cover your equipment with, particularly in sandstorms, dust storms, or rainstorms. And then they are also extremely valuable to put your camera bag or your luggage into when you are traveling by road on the desert and dirt roads of the African countries, or in any place where dust is an absolute horror story. Whether you go to Vietnam, you go to India, you go to any of the African countries, trash bags are a must. Now, passports. People sometimes forget that a passport needs to have at least 6 empty pages and 6 months of validity after you return, not on the date of your travel, but the date of your return. So make sure that your passport is A, current, B, has enough pages, B, has an expiration that is valid. Visas, if you require visas for the place you're going to travel to, get the visa before you travel. There are lots of countries that have this thing known as visa on arrival. And you may think, why go through the hassle of getting my visa before I travel? When I land, I'll get my visa. Well, let's say you go to Tanzania as an example, and you need a visa for Tanzania. You arrive at the airport, and you're sitting there 4 hours later because your turn still hasn't come to get your visa processed. So get your visas before you travel, not on arrival. Of course, I shouldn't have to say about, depends where you are. You may need malaria pills, vaccinations. Take extra days of prescriptions. I typically pack an extra week of prescriptions because you could get stuck in a country. Either it could be an issue with the weather, it could be an issue with your flights. Let's say you go to Iceland and a volcano erupts. There was that time when the volcano erupted and the dust and the ashes were so bad that airports had to close down and there's no way for you to come back. You could you could be really stuck. So make sure you carry extra days of prescriptions. When you arrive, the best thing to do is to get an eSIM for your phone or a SIM for the country that you're going to be in. If you're, let's say, going to be traveling in Europe, then you can get a SIM card or an eSIM that is applicable for all of Europe. And finally, yes, money in foreign exchange, yes, you can do, but make sure that you have a credit card that has a PIN number. If you travel with a credit card that does not require a PIN, in most countries in Europe and in some of the Asian countries, that credit card will not work because they all will require you to put in a PIN. And if there's no PIN, you'll be stuck without having the ability to use your credit card. All right, so now you require a few skills. So number one, you must be organized, right? Know where your stuff is when you're traveling. Know where your stuff is that you can get to it quickly. You need to be able to adapt to time constraints. It's not just the fact that you're going to be traveling and you're going to be jet lagged, but just as an example, you go to Iceland in the summer. Well, when is nighttime? There is no nighttime. So when do you photograph? Well, you photograph when there aren't tourists, because in the summer, tourism in Iceland is so horrendous that the best time to photograph is after 7:30 in the evening until about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, or even 7 o'clock in the morning. So you're going to be photographing during the time when the tourists are sleeping. And if you are not going to be doing that, then forget it. You're not going to be getting your images because they are like flies. They are everywhere. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And of course, it's got to a point where you're not even, this year, we were having problems just finding a place to park because there was no parking spaces left. The other thing is there are a lot of countries that used to have parking that was free. Now it isn't. And there is no way for you to just pay on site and park. You have to use an app to park. So a phone becomes critical. Be rest assured that if you feel that you can get away without paying for parking, they will get you. And not only then do you pay for the parking, but you pay at least 150% on top of that for what they call handling fees. Learn how to communicate, whether it be communicating in the language locally. A few words is always helpful, but more importantly, learn how to at least express yourself by hand motions or whatever it is, so that when you are stuck, you can communicate and get directions, or, even if nothing else, be able to buy food. Places like Japan, you can go into a store and buy really good food, but you don't know what you're buying because everything is in Japanese. So you need to be able to comprehend, when somebody says, "What fish?" You say no fish and they don't know what you're saying. So, that would really help if you can sort of figure out how to talk. And finally, practice at home and, learn how to use your camera. You don't want to be in a situation where something happens and you're fumbling around trying to figure out how to get that shot. This particular image is of a Turako, and I have been to Africa multiple times, and there was only one opportunity that I saw this, and I was able to photograph it. And the only thing that helped me was that I had to modify and change settings really quickly. I was, traveling in a moving vehicle and, tell the guy to pull over, to stop, and you hope and pray that the bird's not going to fly away. By the way, this bird, when it opens its wings, it's brilliant red on the underside. Map out your trip. When you are going to a country, map out your trip. Use Google Maps. set your travel directions right, get your travel times right. Places like Namibia, as an example, you have to be back in the city or the town as soon as it's sundown. The gates close. You can't get in if you are not inside already. And they will not open the gates for you. They will not let you in, period. You cannot drive at night because of the wildlife, and driving at night is not allowed. So now you're really stuck. You could be outside as an example, in Etosha, you could be outside the Etosha National Park without food, without anywhere to go as far as the toilets are concerned. And so the thing is, how much time is it going to take? How much more time do I need when I get a flat? Because you will get flats. The roads are horrible. And will I make it on time? Give yourself at least 45 minutes to an hour so that you can ensure that you will be there when it needs to be. Take into consideration stop times. Take into consideration time to eat food. More importantly, keep in mind that gas is not available everywhere. Even in a modern country like Iceland, you can end up with a situation where you run out of gas because you didn't fill up at the last gas station. So if you are at a quarter tank, time to fill up if you come to a gas station. And yes, you may say that I'm wasting time, but in the long run, it pays off. Keep your tank full. Again, in Iceland, plan your trip. If you're going to circumvent, just location by location, you set your trip up. And then when you are in a location, let's say you are, in the eastern part of Iceland, you're going to be traveling and you're going to be going to lots of different places to do your photography. So for each day, you need to map out how you're going to go from place A to place B to place C, and make sure that that planning includes the travel location, the direction of light, and whether you're going to be doing morning photography or evening photography. And the whole point is, depending upon where you are and when you're there. So for example, Iceland is a good, situation where if you're there in the summer, after 9 o'clock and through the day till, let's say, 7 o'clock, you can go and explore where you are going to photograph, but you are not going to photograph. Not that the light is bad. Light is pretty good. The fact is that there's just way too many tourists. However, if you go there, the same location in the winter, you can photograph all day. There are very few tourists. They don't like the cold. You have the country to yourself. And there's not many people that are actually Icelandic, so you're just one extra. Whereas now, you're 1 in 1,000 extra. So summers and winters, that planning is all up to you as to what you want to do. I do a fair number of photo tours and workshops. Just very quickly. This is the 2025 plan. I'm not doing any tours in the 2024 year. This year's been really a whole lot of new scouting, but gives you an idea of, doing Japan, India, Cape Cod here, Tanzania, Namibia, New York, Bosque, and a few others based upon how the planning works out. But this is all tentative. I do put all this information up on my website, and you're welcome to have a look there. So, being a wildlife photographer, being my primary passion, I'm going to run through some images quickly. These are images from Namibia. I use lens supports for my wildlife photography. Gimbals to me are important. The lightest and the cheapest form of a gimbal is a Wimberley Sidekick, which actually mounts onto your ball head, or you can get a full or a lighter gimbal anywhere from Benrose to the Pro Media Gear Katanas. These are all fabulous if you want to do wildlife photography. If you're not into wildlife photography, then a tripod and ball head is more than sufficient for most of your landscapes and cityscapes, etc. I do carry a thing called the Kirk window mount. It's actually a mount that attaches to your door window, and you can put a ball head on it, or you can put a gimbal on it, mount your camera on there. Just remember that when you're using any kind of a mount or any kind of support in your vehicle, when you get to a place, turn the vehicle off. I've seen so many people with their engine running and they're trying to take pictures and they come back with blurry images and they say, well, why is it? Well, because your engine was running. I mean, that vibration is enough to ruin anything. Take images that are different. Look for different opportunities. Go out early in the morning. And even if you are in a location where they don't let you out of the camp that you're in or the lodge that you're in till a particular time, you can still do a lot of photography in that location. There are water holes that are available for you to be at. And in the morning, when the steam and the mist is rising off the water, you can get some images that are really exceptional. Get close to your subject if you can. If you're using, a 70 to 200 and you feel that you could get a better image, don't hesitate to change your lens. I mean, make sure that when you change your lens out in the field like that you put your camera and lenses inside the garbage bag so that you don't collect any incremental dust on your sensor. So switch your lenses to get better and tighter shots. Wait for the light. We have all the time in the world. If you spot some wildlife, there is no harm because they're not going to just, run away from you. They're more curious as to who you are and what you're trying to do. So they'll sit and stare at you, wait for the light and get that opportunity. Middle of the day. People say don't photograph in the middle of the day. Well, to me, if you have an opportunity, photograph in the middle of the day. The wildlife is not going to wait to eat just because you want to photograph it doing something or that activity early morning or late evening. They're going to eat when they see their prey, when they are hungry, and they'll go for it. So use that as your opportunity to get your wildlife images. Shoot for impact. To me, none of these images may or may represent the country or the location that you're in, but be aware that a lilac-breasted roller is only in Africa. Be aware that lions sitting on termite mounds would be either a Botswana image or a Tanzania image, or some lions will in Namibia, but the likelihood of that is not so much. So that's a kind of a way to identify from a travel point of view wildlife images in locations where they are. The snow macaques, there's only one place in the world that the snow macaques do this kind of thing where they sit in the mist and in the water, and that's in Japan, in northern Hokkaido. So it is representative, but it is not a direct representation. So if you were to see this, and if you were not aware that this is what happens in a particular location, then it may be not so much a true travel image. But to me, a representation is more than sufficient to define it to be a travel image. Very late light is also good. If you can get defined outlines, if you can get definition in the subject, don't hesitate to take dark images. I love dark images. It just has a different feel and a different mood. But always look for what it is that you're trying to shoot to get that impact. Now, when creatures are in motion, particularly birds in flight, animals running, and things of that sort, you have to be able to very quickly switch your camera to get good focus and also to prevent any motion blur. Using things like AI servo or continuous focus, most cameras today that are being made for wildlife photographers or even non-wildlife photographers have the ability to do eye autofocus and tracking. And they have settings for, animals. They have settings for birds. They have settings for humans. And now they've even got settings for cars and motorcycles and stuff like that. But be aware that if you set your focus sensor to do what you expect it to do, then you will get the images that you're trying to get. A tawny eagle killing a pigeon and flying off with it. It's such a fast action that takes place that if you're fumbling around trying to grab focus and shoot, ain't going to happen. Let the camera do the work for you. And these cameras have become so good today that the likelihood of your missing is your fault. Now, if you do, for whatever reason, are tracking a bird in flight and you lose focus, don't keep the thing saying, why isn't it grabbing focus? Stop shooting, release the shutter and depress it again. You will reacquire focus. The camera just does it. And the other thing that I want you to always be aware of, long lenses have what's known as focus ranges. Predetermine the focus range that you need so that the lens will focus much quicker if it only has to hunt in a small area rather than trying to hunt the full length of the lens from 10 feet to infinity, because that's what it'll try and do. But if you limit the range that it's going to focus on, it's going to make your life much easier. And finally, don't shoot subjects that are moving away from you. We call it in Africa, it's like, you don't want the African butt shot, right? The African butt shot is a total waste of time. You shoot animals when they're coming towards you. You shoot animals if they are coming across in front of you. But once they have moved from a perpendicular to where you are shooting, stop shooting, because then you're going to get butt shots. Action shots are a lot of fun, but here again, this is an okay image as far as I'm concerned. A wildebeest running across, yeah, but is it really impactful, or is something like this impactful? But this is what you want. This is what makes that image a wow image rather than just an image of wildebeest running. Action as far as his secretary birds that are doing their mating dance. A very rare opportunity, but when you get it, shoot it. It's not going to happen again. In the 20 years of my wildlife photography in Africa, this is 2 years ago was the first time I saw this out in the wild actually happening. Opportunities to get action motion and define it with a bit of sand moving below the feet. Yes, the oryx doesn't necessarily always run up sand dunes, but when it walks over the sand dunes, try and get some motion to define it. Again, look for decent light. Look for light that is going to make your images impactful. A single cheetah or a pair of cheetahs running across the wilderness. I mean, it's just a lot of fun just watching and observing and trying to get the image that you really want. And in situations like this, yes, light is important. Be mindful of the fact that you get too carried away photographing when the light goes low and you have forgotten how far you are away from your lodge. You don't make it back, you're in trouble. And then opportunities like this. This is here in Bosque del Apache, New Mexico, where, you have these blast-offs with, 60,000 geese that just fly up in the morning. And it happens once a day or twice a day. Be there at the right time to be able to get it. Yes, you may be freezing just because it is very cold, but where and how do you get an opportunity of this kind of an image, being able to capture it, once in a lifetime? Go black and white if you want to. I mean, if you find distractions or time of day issues, convert your images to black and white. One of the best ways I've found is that if you are in the middle of the day and you want to do some black and white imagery, is to set your camera to actually shoot in black and white mode so that you on the back of your LCD, you will see the image in black and white. It's not going to take black and white images. It's still going to take full color images if you're shooting in RAW, but it gives you a visual as to what it is that you're shooting. And then when you convert that RAW image, then you will, convert it based upon what you saw and what your mind will remember. The important thing is, I use the term when you shoot in RAW. My preference is to always shoot in RAW. You have a lot more latitude to make image adjustments if you shoot in RAW. JPEG, yes, quick and dirty, fine. So if you really want that, then shoot both RAW and JPEG together so that the JPEG file you can shoot off on your iPhone or whatever it is to whomever you want, but use the RAW file to really work your images to make them impactful. Wildebeest, that during migration, here again, it's an opportunity. You don't get to see it every day. You don't get to see it every time on every visit. But when you do, make that shot. This image was actually used by Panasonic in one of the banners that were created. And I'm proud to have been the photographer who took it. So for wildlife, again, shoot as much as possible in manual mode. You don't need tight apertures. Apertures of 5.6 to f8 are sufficient. Your shutter speed for action should be at least 1/2500 because you don't want motion blur to impact your image. And use your ISO and exposure compensation to make your exposure correct. Don't hesitate to use auto ISO. Today's cameras are really good. You can set an upper ISO limit. You can set it to 6400 if you feel that that's going to be a problem beyond that. But test out your camera and make sure that you are maximizing the capabilities of the camera and not limiting yourself by saying, oh, no, I'm not going to shoot beyond ISO 400. You may miss a lot of good opportunities if you do that. So, set your exposure, check your histogram, make sure that as much as possible you're not killing the highlights, but also make sure that you're not, blocking up the shadows completely. Shadows, as I say, you can recover them. Blown highlights, the likelihood of recovery is near to zero. Now, there's one other thing. For high-speed bursts and you're shooting in RAW, if your camera has compressed RAW, then use compressed RAW because it is a smaller file. The compression makes it smaller, and you're able to maintain higher burst rates. Full RAW, at times you will get some sluggishness in your camera just because the buffer is filling up and does not empty out as fast. Always, please always buy the fastest cards based upon what camera you're using. Do not skimp on cards. You buy, a $2,000, $3,000 camera, and then you buy a $24 card. Well, it's like, putting a $5 lens in front of a $2,000 lens and making it worth nothing. Focusing ranges, again, I mentioned this earlier. Focusing areas, again, use pinpoint focus if you want only for stationary subjects. But custom areas with tracking are really, really worth it. And if you are just, waiting for something to happen and you're not sure what it is that's going to come out of the bush, then put it into large area and set your tracking so that whatever happens, wherever it happens in the frame, you're able to get that image. And use the custom functions of your camera to set a few buttons at the back to change the way your camera moves from large area focus to, zone focus and anything in between. Whatever you get familiar with is what you should have quickly available on one of those buttons or two of those buttons so you can quickly switch over in, times of action. I won't go too much into this, but, based upon subject movement and predictability, there are various ways you can set your camera, and this is just a graphic representation of that. Burst mode, always use burst mode for peak action. Focusing points so that you don't focus on the grass, you focus on your subject, keeping your eye in focus. Using pre-burst, where your camera is actually taking images prior to you having pressed the shutter. It is filling the buffer at a certain rate of images so that when you press the shutter, you typically end up missing the image that you needed. But using pre-burst, it has already captured the image, so the likelihood of you losing that point or that defining moment gets really established for you rather than missed for you. Here again, a hummingbird's, tongue coming out is something that you really capture. But if you use pre-burst, you see it happen, you press the shutter, the image was captured prior to your pressing the shutter. Getting into architecture and cityscapes, again, an important part of your travel photography. Things that you can do, what I would recommend is if you get a camera, see that it has a nice screen which can articulate. Thereby you can shoot low, you can shoot high and point the screen the direction that you're standing or facing so that you can get the image that you want. Otherwise, lying down on the ground is no fun, particularly at my age, because getting up is the problem. Lying down is never a problem. Getting up is the problem. In interiors, you want to be able to capture interiors in natural light. Long exposures become critical. So if you go into basilicas or churches or, like in Paris or in Montreal, they don't let you carry a tripod in there. So this is where a platypod comes in handy. It's not recognized as a tripod. You put it down on the ground and you can do, 4, 5, 6 minute exposures and capture all the light that exists because most of these are pretty dark. Capture images that have another kind of reference. In Italy, you've got, these small towns that are built alongside hillsides in the Amalfi Coast. Representation with a boat in front makes it more attractive as a travel image. Here again, with, one person praying, church is empty, go capture a nice image, put your camera on the ground or put it on a platypod and use it. Wait for the light. This is in Kolmanskap in Namibia, the old mining town that's been abandoned, sand's taken over. But there's only a short period of time when the sun in the morning is at the right angle and the right direction where it filters through these wooden slats and lights up the inside. And that's when and only when you can take the image. So a little bit of preparation and planning is always helpful. Shooting into the scene, not just the scene, but shooting into it to get that depth, to get that feeling of, being there over a greater distance rather than just a flat image. Here again, time of day, using contrasts, using color, all in the same location. Different buildings, different spots, using curves and leading lines. And then, of course, there's the importance of showing what has transpired over time and how much nature has taken over. And basically, at some point, years from now, there will be nothing left. It'll all be sand. Getting up high. You go to locations, try and get the city from as high as you possibly can get to. You're not necessarily going to be allowed to fly a drone in major cities because it's totally prohibited to do that. But if you can find a location, get up there and shoot. This is Reykjavik from the famous church way up on top, and you can shoot out the windows and get that kind of an image. New York, same way. Get up high and shoot into the city. You can do panoramics, and panoramics at night are very interesting. This is something that typically you wouldn't be able to do. Yes, it is not New York. It is the Statue of Liberty, so that means you're shooting this from a place called Bayonne, and you're not allowed to be there. So if you manage to get there and not get arrested, you can get an image like this. but it's worth the risk. It's another one of New York. Interiors at night. This is the Notre Dame, again taken at floor level. Looking for facades, looking for reflections, get an idea. Amsterdam, the buildings are famous for their architectural shapes, but add some value early morning, get some reflections. Again, graffiti is a big thing in Reykjavik, but colors make it more interesting. And that's the image of the city that was taken from the top windows of this particular church. Using another set of examples of, things that are different, that are unique. A black church, where do you see a black church? Only a few places. So recognition becomes important. Get it in the same kind of mood with clouds, add to the value. And then, of course, city abstractions. Interiors, and then things that are taken just for the record. I mean, if you go to the Eastern State Penitentiary, this was Al Capone's cell. Right? Lived pretty lavish in a pretty nasty place, but so you can still enjoy yourself. Iconic locations with people, iconic locations with so many people that you want to do it at a time so that the people become just a mush and the subject becomes of dominance. I mean, there's literally, 4,000 or 5,000 people standing over there. And then references, if you shoot something like this, it's a bus, but now you know where you are. If there wasn't this bus, you wouldn't recognize where you are because it wouldn't say sightseeing Napoli. Naples, yes, this is where it is. Amsterdam, Pompeii. But then there's also artifacts and artwork that you can capture that, kind of brings another level of interest to your photography. And then, locations. I mean, this is also a cityscape. This is, in Vietnam, and this is what the harbor looks like. Again, shots from Italy, early morning, so that you don't have all the crowds. You like beach scenes, go to it when they set up. There's not a single tourist over there, but this is like 4 o'clock in the morning. Sorry, I'm backwards. Store scenes, also fun, reflective of the place. If you're in Amalfi, lemons are the most important thing, and limoncello is the most important drink that they make over there. So capture the essence of that. Then get into some landscape photography. To me, the great landscapes of the US are just phenomenal. But equivalents, there are same kind of landscapes all over. Here's one feature of the newer cameras that you can do, which allows you to do focus bracketing. And with focus bracketing, you can capture images that are sharp back to front. You don't have to anymore worry about things like, can I use hyperfocal distance? Do I understand it? Do I not? Put your camera into focus bracketing and take the images, set your step count, set your image count. But always remember that you are going to have to merge these images to get them to have the kind of impact that you're looking for. The sand dunes of the Namibian deserts, Quiver Tree Forest, Dead Valley. There's trees that many, many, many years ago just perished when the water went away. And you just have a salt flat with sand dunes in the background. Canada, the fairy tree in Vancouver. Look for contrast, look for shapes and curves and maximize those. This is nothing more than a close-up. You change lenses, put a 70-200 and go in close of a small section of this scene, which is one of the largest dunes in the desert in Namibia. Long exposure photography, the 8-minute exposure done at midnight in Iceland. Again, long exposures, late evening, early morning. Get good light. Early morning light hitting at a very, very sharp angle, giving that glow, giving that level of interest, Portland headlight. When you're shooting into things like canyons, the best way to shoot is when the sun is up high so that the light gets into the canyon. Otherwise, canyons will be dark and they'll be so contrasty that it's just not worth shooting them. Do panoramics. I mean, you're the whole essence of the place. This is the iceberg lagoon in Jökulsárlón in Iceland. Another one of the lagoons of a different iceberg, a different glacier in Iceland. But now you're looking at the clouds and the mood. This is what Iceland looks like most of the time anyway. I mean, it's just dark, gloomy and cloudy. Look for differences and go there in different seasons. This is the Palouse when it's nice and green, and this is the Palouse when the harvest is over. You want to photograph in the fall and all you're looking for is color, go do that. Wait for things to happen at the right time. This is a geyser that is going to erupt. And this is the bubble that forms before the eruption. So wait there for it and time it right. But you know what? One of the best ways to do it is to use what I call, rapid fire, spray and pray, whatever you want to call it. But you want to get that shot when things are just about to happen to get your timing right. Look for skies. Those are fun. Skies will always make an image doubly interesting. Look for mist and fog. Grand prismatic, nothing more than color. Again, early morning. Zabriskie Point, the Great Salt Flats. And then you can do some drone photography. Just remember that when you're doing drone photography, make sure that you are A, licensed, and B, you are licensed for the country that you're going to be flying your drone in. Iceland is a place where they are very happy to have you fly your drone. In a lot of places, they put in a lot of restrictions, but if they catch you, not only will they confiscate your drone, but you will be fined very heavily. So make sure you get the license that also then allows you to fly your drone in all of Europe, and the license will last you for 5 years at a time. So the waterfall that the drone shots were is actually this waterfall. It's called Broarfoss, which is one of the most bluest waterfalls as far as the watercolor is concerned, and it's just an exceptional place to be at. Again, few more views of the same, going in tight and going in tighter. You want to do people with a lot of, their culture, their clothing, their colors. This is all in India. This is Vietnam. This is Iceland. Again, India, Vietnam. People, going about their daily chores, fishing, herding their sheep, clamming, salt mining, and just sitting at a window. Could it be a red light district or what? I don't know. And then tourists. Sometimes tourists are fun to photograph too. Night scenes, even in the cities. Yes, you will have some motion blur. The fact is, a little bit of motion blur does not really impact the image negatively, as long as you get the essence of what's going on. Actually, this is an interesting image on the right, if you noticed. Uh, they drive through here, and I'm surprised that they don't scrape their handlebars and their knees along the walls, because there's just about enough room for a few inches on either side. And of course, the occasional portrait that you tell the guy to look at you and set it up so that you can do it. These images, to me, are the kind of images that you use for, show and tell and competitive purposes. They're not really true travel images. Environmental wildlife. You want to catch your images with, animals in a kind of environmental way. This is in Bosque del Apache in an early morning. It's called, the fire mist. And once in a while, the temperatures are just correct and the sun is just correct, and it happens, and you are there to shoot it. Go for the layering of colors in the natural world, and you can get some great images. This is in Hokkaido at sub-zero temperatures, where you need to not only wear 3 layers of gloves, but if one layer of your gloves is battery operated and heated, you will survive. I not only survived, but ended up with burnt hands because I didn't realize it was so cold I couldn't feel the heating elements burning through my skin. But you will get the image. I mean, that's all hoarfrost, and it is freezing cold. So getting behavior, again, an important thing, behavior. And by now you probably realize that I'm very passionate about wildlife. So you will see a fair amount of wildlife images. So behavior is a good thing that I would like to always capture. You normally see puffins with lots of sand eels, but seeing puffins bring in bigger fish is not that common. So this is something that is a little different. Gannets, northern gannets, colonies of, thousands of breeding pairs all in one location, shielding and protecting their chicks, bringing up fish. You saw this image earlier, tawny eagle with a pigeon. Territorial, more territorial. After a kill, all their bellies are full, they need to drink, and they'll all come together very peacefully. And this is the time that none of the other wildlife could care, because they know that the lions are not going to do a thing. So a short video of Tanzania. This was last year. So sometimes with photography, you're catching subject and you're putting it into a very static situation. But video gives you the opportunity to actually tell the story as it transpires. And it's, more than just a static image. So do more video, particularly when you travel. You can bring back a lot of really good memories. If you can see it on the video, but it was torrential rain, and these 2 leopards had killed this baboon, and one of them had brought it up, pulled it up the tree. and it starts off slow, and then it really gets crazy, and literally, 20, 30,000 wildebeest will cross at the same time. It's just absolutely phenomenal to look at. All right, some more to create that wow, get that real feel for something different. Silhouettes become an essential part of your plethora of images for your portfolio, and village scenes, fishing villages, wildlife. Make sure that your subject is recognizable when you're doing a silhouette. Otherwise, it becomes just a black blob. Look for theme and textures. To me, that's important. Layering and theme and textures. Smoky Mountains and this, southeast of the U.S. Cades Cove. More of an artistic rendition where I've actually added some texture to the image. Same thing here. And then night photography. Night photography is something that, I would really sort of recommend you look at and do, because it gives you an opportunity to do things when really nobody's around. And you can do it at your own pace, peacefully. That's Boston. Badlands, New Hampshire, Italy. Again, the Zakim Bridge in Boston and the Great Church in Reykjavik. And then fireworks, city lines with fireworks. I mean, both these were shot in Boston, 4th of July. And then, of course, the aurora, if you're lucky to get it. This is Niagara Falls in the winter. Bar Harbor, Maine. Again, no tourists. Another one of New York. And usually you'll find thousands of people around this one very iconic sculpture in Reykjavik. But you go there at night, there's nobody there. San Francisco. So star trails, again, a night thing. This is something that the Lumix cameras are really good at, and I believe some Olympus cameras also do, is a concept called live composite, where you can set the camera to do long exposures, and then it'll actually build the exposure one on top of the other based upon where new light is seen or where incremental light is seen. So instead of doing a composite, the camera is actually doing the composite for you. So these star trails that you see behind this, ghost figure with the bicycle in Rhyolite in Death Valley is nothing but a single image that the camera has, resulted in by doing a live composite of about nearly an hour of images. So it's a great feature, and you can do cityscapes with it, you can do star trails, you can do all kinds of stuff. Then you can do some time-lapse images. Again, time-lapse is a feature that really attracted me to the Panasonic camera line in 2013. That's when I started using them, and then became an ambassador. So with that, thank you for your time. I say there's one set of words I'll leave you is just travel everywhere. Go get your images, give it that feel that you got so that the people you show it to can get the feeling that you experienced. And what is that? Okay, let me do this. Okay, quit that. I'm sorry, something happened, and I don't know if you can still see my screen or not, but if not, my apologies. So there are some questions that had come up prior, and let me try and respond to those. There's a question as to how much gear you should travel with. So, I mean, I think I kind of answered that. Travel with only what you believe you will need. There's always this thing about, stuff that I would like to have. Should I have? Could I have? Not really that important. If there was just one camera and one lens, then it would be a camera with a 24 to 70, and I'd be quite happy with it, with the exception of when I'm doing, safaris or landscape safaris that would require a longer lens. Favorite time of day to shoot? I think any time is a good time based upon where you are. Iceland in the summer, you shoot after 7:30 at night and you shoot till 7:30 in the morning. If you're going to Africa in the wilderness for safari, you are limited to shooting from sunrise to sundown, and maybe in some locations 1 hour after sundown. That's about it. So you can't always pick what I would call a favorite time. But if there was a favorite time in an unrestricted location, my favorites are, golden hour morning, golden hour evening, and definitely night photography, because I can do it, as I said, peacefully at my own pace. Any tips for composition with limited lens, i.e. a 50 millimeter fixed? I think composition is something that is a subject unto itself, and I will ask Adorama if they would like me to do a composition program that I have. It's about an hour and a half program on composition. But really, composition is going to depend upon what the subject is that you're shooting. And whatever it is, you don't want to do what I call a head-on shot, because the head-on shot can become boring. So try and make the image or compose the image such that at some location where your primary subject is placed, or your primary actor, as I call it, is placed, is positioned such that there are supporting actors or elements that bring you from them to your primary actor. And if you can keep that in the back of your head, your compositional skills will definitely become much, much better if you are struggling with composition. How can I use depth of field more effectively? Well, depth of field is a really interesting concept. You sometimes want a shallow depth of field, and sometimes you want a very deep depth of field. For landscape photography, you want deep depth of field. You want things to be in sharp focus from the front of your scene to the very back of your screen. But when you're shooting a bird, or when you're shooting an animal, if the environment is not that critical, then you want a shallow depth of field. You just want that primary subject to be in good focus, and you want the background to fall off. So really, it's the effectiveness of depth of field becomes crucial based upon what it is that you are photographing and how you want to represent it to your audience. Good example, if you're doing macro photography, depth of field is an issue because you're so close and your magnification is so high that no matter what you do, nothing is going to work. And if you try and do an aperture which is going to be like an F-22 or an F-32, you are subjecting yourself to a problem called diffraction, so you don't want to go there. So to compensate for that, you can today at least focus stack and then combine those images to give you the kind of depth of field that you're looking for. Is landscape photography possible in your 60s? Absolutely. I'm many years over 60, and I have no problem doing landscape photography. So keep yourself healthy, carry minimal gear, plan on what it is that you're going to shoot so that you carry the right lens and the right camera to do it. And that's about it. I mean, when you're having to hike distances to do a landscape, then be cognizant of the fact that the more you carry, the worse it's going to be. So, less is more. It is said that the photographer makes the image, not the camera. Do you agree? Or is there a particular camera or lens that you consider essential? I think the camera is only a tool, and you use the tool to do what it's supposed to do, is to capture. But it is you who decides what it captures. It is you who decides how it captures it. And so, yeah, definitely, in my opinion, the camera should be treated as a tool, not as the photographer. Do you have a calculator for selling travel photos to clients? I think I mentioned this in the beginning. I don't sell my images, so I don't need a calculator. How to determine minimum depth of field based upon aperture setting versus minimum f-stop of lens or wide-angle lenses from 8 to 35. Okay, your wide-angle lenses, 8 to 35 range, will always give you a lot of depth of field. I mean, they're basically wide angles, gives you a lot of depth of. If you really want to get into the details and the technical aspects of calculating depth of field, the best way to do it is to either use a tool like PhotoPills, which has a depth of field calculator, or, in my opinion, using a tool like that will give you the answers, but the best answers are with your own experimentation. So try different lenses at different apertures and see what happens to a subject that you are familiar with, and place it in a situation where there is some background so you can see how the background is impacted. It's not just the depth of field of the subject, it's also the depth of field of the scene that you're taking that becomes critical. Which lenses are best to take? I think I answered that question with what I typically carry when I'm traveling. So hopefully you've got a decent idea about that. Do you ask permission to photograph people? Well, if I'm photographing a person to specifically take their portrait, yes, I will ask them. In fact, I might even ask them to pose in a particular way. But if I'm just doing street scenes or street photography, I'm not obligated to ask, because they are in a public place and I'm shooting in a public place. So there is, but if I was going to be using that image for monetary purposes, then yes, I would not only have to ask, but also get a model release. So, it really depends upon what it is. If all you're doing is, street photography for your own, travel records, you don't necessarily have to ask permission. I don't see any other questions over here. If there are, they haven't been posted, but I hope I've responded to everything that I was asked. Yes, I think I've covered them all. So, by the way, just as a point, this last slide is, if you have any questions, give me a call or email me. I have my phone number here. If I don't pick up the phone, but it's because I don't recognize the number, just leave me a message and say, you were at such and such presentation, the Adorama 42 event, and you have a question. Could I call you back? And I will call you back. You can email me. That way, your question will definitely be responded to. My website has tons of information, whatever you are looking for. If it isn't there, as I said, please ask. And I don't have a lot on YouTube, and I have a reasonable amount on Instagram, but I'm not a social media person, a heavy social media person. I do some Facebook stuff, but apart from that, my website is the best place to see my work, my blog, and to stay in touch. With that, thank you very much. Really appreciate your coming today and spending time with me. And I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed presenting to you.